About a year later, 13 months later, Steve again came to me and said, Ronnie, I'd like to talk to you. There's some more work to do. And in this case, the piece of work seemed, on the face of it, actually quite a lot simpler. It involved bringing in, again, in our old friend, the false bottom suitcase, some passports and money and some instructions for a number of people who were already inside the country, black people, who needed false passports to operate, because under the pass laws they had pass books but which severely restricted them. Well, I went to Durban and the site of the meeting was out, very small little town on a railway line about 40 miles outside of Durban. My mission was to meet up with a guy whose name I didn't know but whose description I had. So I took the material out to Tonga, went early, had a good look round, nobody there, everything seemed okay. Went back at the specified time and there was my contact. We exchanged passwords. I can't remember what the password was. The password was entered correctly. I gave him the material, walked away about 5 yards, and then somebody said, "Hold it, boss," ironically. Turned round and then there were about 6 guys, all black guys, with heavily armed, pointing their guns at me, and I was arrested. It was a trap. They'd captured the contact I was meant to meet, Petrus Ntembu's name was. He'd been severely tortured. They'd substituted him with a South African black policeman, unfortunately, who was the double of my contact, Petrus. So letters had been sent from him indicating that he was okay. He'd had to do this under, obviously, extraordinary duress. I mean, the torture was dreadful. Dreadful torture he endured.
Did he tell you?
Yeah. I saw his body. He'd had his feet smashed, his toes broken, he'd had broken ribs, he'd had shoulder dislocated, he'd had electric shock treatment on his genitals, he had burns all over him, he was severely treated. So there was nothing he could do about the letters, and they identified the danger code, or I'm in captured code, out of the letters. So the ANC didn't know at that point that he'd been captured. They held me for 8 months in solitary confinement before properly bringing charges and commencing the trial procedure. Ronnie said, you can expect a few hard days at the very least. So I, in a weird way, I was calm. I was resigned to it. I was scared, yeah, of course, but not. I never lost control, I guess. First of all, they took me in a chartered little plane around 4 or 5 places in South Africa. I went to Bloemfontein, I went to Durban, obviously, to Pretoria, Johannesburg, or another, but I can't remember. Whistle stops to meet all their branches of the boss of the state security. You know, they hadn't caught a foreigner before like me, so they were parading me around a bit. Standard procedure, I guess, for the first few weeks. A story that you'll hear from many other people. Sleep deprivation, assaults, beatings. Their favourite was they took me out to a field in the dead of night. I have no idea what time it was. It was dark. this was a favourite trick. They'd lean you over a prepared grave and say, right, you've got to tell us everything you know now, no matter what you knew or didn't know. And then a few moments later, they'd fire a starting pistol just behind your ear. And that was a favourite trick, and they did it to me. And so they segregated prisoners, and even political prisoners. Eventually, when I was a political prisoner, I was only with the white prisoners, which there were about a dozen of us. People like Bram Fisher, Dennis Goldberg, Kitts and others, in Pretoria, whilst Mandela and every other black prisoner was on Robben Island. They took me to the maximum place in Pretoria, where where death row is, where the prisoners are waiting to be hung. You could hear them. Thursday was hanging day, and they would hang 8. Until Wednesday afternoon, they would not know which 8 were going to be hung. So, you were in a lottery of whether it was your turn this Thursday or not. But on Wednesday afternoon, and I know this because, as I said, a Boer warder showed it to me, the 8 who were picked would receive a very official-looking document from the state president saying, it's you are to be hung tomorrow. And ironically, the state president's official paper commenced with greetings. Greetings from the state president, you are to be hung tomorrow, or words to that effect. And then on the Wednesday, you would hear, they would start off singing at about 6 o'clock on the Wednesday night, singing in this, wonderfully beautiful, melodic, joint African voice, just singing, and it built up to a rhythmic sort of chant, rhythmic. No instruments, obviously, but they would play, whatever they could get on the bars of the prison thing, a rhythm, and they would build it all up and sing throughout the whole of the Wednesday night to help whoever the 8 were who were going to be hanged. And then I was there for that Wednesday, and you would hear them going, and then they were hung, I think it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and then at about 5 to 7 it would just stop. After all those hours of chanting and singing in African rhythmic voices together, it would stop, and for the hanging. And then there would just be eerie silence for hours after, and that was hugely dramatic, hugely moving, because the level of, even at those extreme times, and they were all, potentially it was them next Thursday, the sense of mutual support, the sense of comradeship in those extreme circumstances was fantastic. I'll never forget it.